half of the topic lecture, and I have to tell you how to negate the resolution that says that we should let some more people into this country. And I think that's a pretty hard job to do. I don't think that this is a phenomenon that's particularly new to you. If you debated last year in policy, the topic was to like make education better. I also thought that that was a pretty hard thing to negate. And leaves the neg topic lecture looking more like the politics dissad and the bland generic K lecture. And I will talk about those things, and on a topic where the sort of realist reason why something is a bad idea or it isn't happening is political objections, the politics dissent actually does kind of make sense. Sometimes the politics dissent doesn't make sense. Sometimes it does. On this topic, in a lot of instances, it'll make a lot of sense because one of the biggest objections to doing immigration policy, to letting more people into this country, is that the people who are already here just kind of don't want to do that. What are, if you pay attention to the news, what are some of the main anti-immigrant discourses that you hear in the news? Lindsay.
They're going to take our jobs.
They'll take our jobs. And that's not a very good dissent, because it turns out that when you look at the studies, immigrants create jobs. They create a lot of complementary jobs, and they help domestic citizens move up the job chains and get better jobs. Now, that's on the like, decisively true. Like, you would have a very hard time winning the jobs DA in a debate. Now, there are some econ arguments on neg that are not bad, and we will talk about those.
Kind of post 9/11 terrorist kind of things.
And remind me your name and or nickname.
Nico or Nico Montoya, I think.
Oh, we'll go Nico for now. Yeah, the terrorism DA. The Trump administration and sons like to parrot this through the Skittles analogy. If you had a bowl of Skittles and just one or two of them were poisoned, would you eat the bowl of Skittles? This is also a thing that's not a real DA. And the Georgetown camp cut the terrorism DA, and I couldn't stop laughing because it is terrible. The problem with the Skittles analogy is that we've let in millions of refugees, and none of them have committed an act of terrorism in the United States. The Obama administration in 2016 let in 14,506 Syrian refugees. In the past, since 2018 began, we have let in 11 Syrian refugees. 11. That is a decrease of 14,493. I don't know. Math is not my strong suit. I'm a debate camp, not math. But it is like 15,000% decrease. And none of those 15,000 Syrian refugees committed an act of terrorism. The problem with the Skittles analogy is that if every one of those Skittles was a human being, and by eat them in the metaphor you meant, could I save their life? Would I risk one of them harming me? I absolutely would, because why wouldn't you save 14,930 lives if you thought one of them might do something dangerous when empirically that's never happened, and there's easier ways to get in the country than as a refugee, which is a 2-year vetting process. The problem with the nag on this topic is those mainstream discourses just don't err toward the side of truth. So we have to figure out what's the real debate in immigration policy. And I'm going to go through disads, critiques, topicality, and then counterplans. Disads. I said that there was an econ argument that makes sense, and that you don't have to divorce yourself from reality to debate, and that's the wages DA. Not jobs, but wages. How much are people getting paid? Because there is a relationship between how many people are in the labor market and how good the labor market is. This is something that economists study, that there are rigorous studies produced about, and immigration is not so much then a question of different people, right? That's what the mainstream discourses are. We can't let in people because they're different. To me, that's a fundamentally silly concern. And I'm in real life an advocate for open borders, and you might not be used to your teachers telling you what they actually believe in, but I'm not used to high school because I work in college, and I don't mind just being like, oh, hi, I'm a leftist who believes in open borders and thinks there should be freedom of movement. So that's me. But the wages DA doesn't say immigrants are bad because they're different. It just says, hey, having a lot of people in the labor pool is a bad thing. And that a tight labor market right now, and by tight labor market, I mean that there is not a bunch of excess capacity. If you want to hire a bunch of people, you have a limited pool that you can hire from. That creates really high wages. And so if I had created a PowerPoint for this lecture today, I would show one slide that had a graph going up that showed that we had really high wages right now. And I would say this is uniqueness for your DA. Wages right now are going up. They've been steadily recovering since 2008, and that's the reason why we should protect the tight labor market that we have now and not let in a bunch of immigrants. And then I would immediately show you another slide with another graph that says that wages are stagnant and have not been increasing, and I would remind you that there are three kinds of statistics: lies, dandelions, and statistics. There are three kinds of lies: lies, dandelions, and statistics. Whether or not wages are high right now is definitely a matter of debate. And that gets us back to the wages DA is not perfect, but it's a debate. It's a real thing. They're taking our jobs and they're terrorists. Those are not real things. Those are things people say to make you afraid of people who look a little bit different than you. They're not backed up by rigorous academic studies or any type of study. The wages DA certainly could be a debate that expanding the market hurts people's wages. And then you have an econ DA. You say wages are important to the economy. Deflation would wreck a tepid recovery that we have right now. Slow growth is bad. Economic decline causes war. You have a standard debate 101. Okay, I've got econ DA because wages. The uniqueness debate goes both ways. You can have a good debate about wages are high or not. The link debate goes both ways. You can have a good debate about whether or not immigration benefits wages across the board or hurts people's wages. And that's just a good, fun econ debate to be had that is a totally real thing. Brain drain is another DA. I like the brain drain DA. The brain drain DA says, let's talk about the H-1B Act. Italy, remind me your name? Francisco. You told us what H-1Bs were before. Tell us again.
H-1B are temporary, high-skilled visas.
Yes, exactly. And its corollary LPR visa is the EB-1, the permanent high-skilled worker visa. So EB-1s and H-1Bs are high-skilled workers. The only difference is temporary or permanent. The thesis behind the H-1B Act is that those are really smart people that do really cool things. And you can get a bunch of different advantages. Our H-1B affirmative has an economy advantage and a tech advantage. And the tech advantage has several different scenarios. And you can just proliferate tech advantages. You can be like, we need the best and the brightest people to come to the United States because we need to invent cool things to do space travel, cool things to do biotechnology to prevent pandemics, cool things to do nanotechnology that solves a whole bunch of other things, cool things, smart people to do artificial intelligence that solves a whole bunch of other things. And the thesis of the act remains the same. We need the best and the brightest, the cream of the crop. Those are terms that get thrown around in the literature to talk about H-1B visas because the people who get those visas are really smart. They have advanced degrees. They've spent years studying in their field. Now, I like the brain drain DA because it says, you know what, you're right. Those are the best and the brightest. So the question is, where would they be if they weren't here, right? The F says, we should take in the best and the brightest. The brain drain DA says, from where? Because when we take the best and the brightest, we are draining the brain drain, of someone else. Maybe the best and the brightest are flocking to India, China, Australia, Israel, Canada. Those are, off the top of my head, DAs that were read at the first tournament on the college immigration topic a couple of years ago. That wherever these people are coming from, whether it's H-1B visas or EB-5 visas, that person, an EB-5 visa requires you to invest, I think, someone can Google and fact check me, but let's say at least $100,000. I know it's six figures. I don't remember if it's 100 or 200 or 250, but you have to put six figures into the United States. And if we increase EB-5 visas by 10,000, what is 10,000 times 100,000? I know it's not math camp, but someone's going to tell me. You can Google, you can use a calculator. What is 10,000?
I forgot the question.
We have the question is, what is 10,000 times 100,000? And we have a lukewarm answer that says it's a billion. Now, I'm not sure. 10 million? 10 billion. That sounds right to me. 10 billion sounds right to me. So, if EB-5 visas say you have to invest $100,000 into the United States, and in exchange, we will give you citizenship. And by the way, isn't it the weirdest sounding thing ever? You literally buy citizenship. It kind of feels so gross to me. That's what citizenship is. You get to vote in America if you pay $100,000. Gross. I don't like it, but whatever. $100,000, 6 figures. If we increase those visas by 1,000, Vani, right, Vani, says that that's $10 billion that comes into our economy. And the brain drain dissat asks, where would it have gone instead? That's $10 billion. It's not created out of nothing. It's exchanged for citizenship. It would have been spent somewhere else. Maybe in China. Maybe that's $10 billion that would have been spent developing Chinese infrastructure, developing businesses in China. And that is a China brain drain DA. You create opportunities for investment in exchange for citizenship in the United States. That money comes from somewhere. So you are taking it away from where it was going to be. That's the brain drain DA. The brain drain DA is good, but it's not a universal DA. Do you feel how like the H-1B DA is like, we could have smart people in America, but that means the smart people won't be in India. The EB-5 DA is not about smart people per se. It's not about like the person who has a master's in engineering who builds advanced equipment for the International Space Station. The EB-5 DA could be about someone who's really smart, but what distinguishes that person is they have 6 figures of cash that they can just throw around to buy citizenship. Those DAs are absolutely not the same thing. You can't read the same brain drain DA to EB-5s that you can to EB-1s or H-1Bs. And now we're in the field of acronyms. Okay, I got 2 questions. Question 1 right here, then question 2 over there.
Why would the U.S. care if that 10 billion was part of the U.S. GDP versus China or India or some other country? Why would that be a bad thing for the U.S.?
Perhaps the question should not be why would the U.S. care, but why would a rational person care? I can say, constructing my China brain drain DA, that that investment in China is key to their economy, and Chinese economic collapse destabilizes Asia, and Asian destabilization is bad. Like maybe causes China to try and take over the Spratlys in the South China Seas and do a resource grab there, which starts an international war. If China's economy falls apart and you can win that the draining of that huge amount of capital from China would devastate their economy during a particularly fragile period, especially given that we're about to start a trade war with them, you can win a very significant impact to why that's bad. To switch to our India example, you do the same thing. You have an Indian econ DA. The best and the brightest in India is key to the Indian economy. Indian economic decline causes war with Pakistan. That's the brain drain DA that's in the camp file. It's an Indian econ DA. It's going to be a very common argument on this topic. So while it might be natural to say we're in the United States, perhaps we think we're simulating United States policymakers, we should only care about impacts that happen in the United States. As a cosmopolitan, open borders leftist hack, I'm just like, no, we got to care about everywhere. But as a rational policymaker, I think that the destabilization of Asia or India's economy are also very bad things. But that's a very good question. The reason we care is because we construct impacts to these scenarios. I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to go over here. Yes?
So you would have to run, if you want to run both brain drains, then you would have to have one about taking the smart people away from what it could have been there, and then one about the money?
Oh, well, very good question. You run the DA that fits the AF. If you are debating an AF that's about H-1Bs, and as Francisco told us, that's high-skilled workers on a temporary visa, then you read a brain drain DA about high-skilled workers, the best and the brightest, the cream of the crop, the smartest people. Now, different round. Round 5 of the tournament, you're neg against a different team, and they read EB-5s. Then you have to have a different brain drain DA in your pocket. And this jumps back to the very first thing I said in this lecture, was that an immigration bad lecture it's a silly lecture to give because it's not a true argument. But your specific about immigration bad lecture makes a whole lot more sense. So a brain drain DA about immigration isn't a real thing. But a brain drain DA specific to the EB5 AF that you read in one round, and a brain drain DA specific to an H1B AF that you read in a different round, because people read different AFs, those are good arguments. Does that answer your question?
Right, so what I wanted to say, I think it's not that we should really be worried that if China's economy falls apart, it would be bad for China for these or just for these other countries, because it's bad for the U.S. too.
Oh yeah, sure.
Just look at any product that's a bit more cheaply made, and you'll see a made in China sticker on it.
Of course. Now I think you should be able to persuade a rational human being that they should care about the lives of people in other countries. But you're certainly right that the U.S. and Chinese economy are interconnected is such a understatement that to destroy one would certainly destroy the other. Nico.
Well, I think another thing you could say is that kind of by letting kind of free trade be permeating the world since kind of the fall of the Soviet Union, we've kind of let China kind of come up as the secondary kind of power in the world. And so they are second place to us if we are going by the standard that the U.S. is the hegemon. And so then kind of the power that we've given them makes them a very important ally economically in some ways to have.
Yep. Same page. Okay. So brain drain DAs are vast and diverse. They will depend on the app you're debating, and they will depend on where the flow of people exists. Now, most EB5 visas, those people might be people who are predominantly investing in China. H1Bs, they come from all over the world, but predominantly India. A different visa, people will come from different places. And like I said, I did a laundry list of countries: Canada, Israel, India, China, the UK, Australia, the Philippines. Those are all brain drain DAs that were produced so far just at camps. And this is going to develop over the course of the year, where it'll be, sort of pick a country out of a hat. Are the people that are coming into the United States as an effective plan? Where are they coming from? And you have a whole bunch of advantages about why it's important for them to be in the United States. It was probably important for them to be somewhere else. One of the biggest brain drains that's talked about in scholarly literature is doctors and nurses. That people come to the United States to get an advanced education in medicine, and we functionally steal the doctors of the developing world. If you're in a country where life in the United States looks like a better life to you, and you have the opportunity to get an education here, after you finish that education, you face a choice. Do you go home, do you take that knowledge with you, or do you stay in the United States? It's not universal that people choose to stay in the United States, certainly not at all, but those that do, that's human capital that no longer exists in the country, the sending country. And so we've seen a sort of global crisis where there is a shortage of doctors and nurses in a lot of countries because of the opportunity to get that education somewhere else or get a job somewhere else and then just leave. And so H1Bs, that includes doctors and nurses. Some people will read asks just about nurses, just about doctors. I think the AF that has a requirement that immigrants, we let in a bunch of doctors and nurses, but we require them to go to rural areas, because the United States even has a rural healthcare crisis with a shortage of particularly nurses. I think the app that says that lots of immigrants can come in if they're nurses, but they have to go to the Sun Belt, to rural areas, I think it's a stellar app. But the downside to that is that some country now just like is missing like 50,000 nurses. It's like, that sucks, right? That's a DA. Yeah.
I am a little confused on one thing. So I heard about this story. So there is a doctor or one, basically a pretty smart person. He came from another country and he came here. And one of the things he did once he was getting a better education and a place that could offer a more advanced education that he needed, he basically made a super small and cheaply made microscope. And you know how they check for malaria, and you know how they put those. I can't remember the exact name of it right off the top of my head, but basically they put into one of those things that.
Centrifuge.
Yeah, he basically made a super cheap centrifuge.
What's your name?
My name's Jackson.
Jackson. Jackson is next level right now. Jackson is articulating some of the very, very good answers to the brain drain DA. There's a bunch of good answers to the brain drain DA. Now this lecture is about introducing you to the arguments that you can read on the negative, but there's certainly not unbeatable arguments. And this antidote is a really smart argument that even when people come from other countries and stay in the United States, even if they don't go home, they often develop technologies, skills that they send back home, or remittances, which are transfers of cash that you send back to your family or people that you left behind. That transfer of technology, skills, cash, or your person, if you go back, the H-1B visa, as Nico's emphasized 3 times, as Francisco's emphasized 3 times, is temporary. And so one of the biggest answers to brain drain, and think about that, right? Brain drain. That tells you everything you need about the argument. We're taking the brains from someone else, those smart people. One of the biggest answers is brain circulation. We're not taking them. We're borrowing them. We're teaching them. We're giving them back. H-1B visa is temporary. You come over, you participate in our economy, you make our economy better, you go home. You make your economy better, right? You bring your skills here, you pick up some skills here, you bring them back home. Francisco.
How is the H-1B visa applicable? Because if it's like they just like go here and leave, doesn't that like violate the legal immigration?
That's a good question. Does legal immigration include non-immigrant visas? That is something that is going to be a big debate, especially at the beginning of the year. It's something that that people who like teach at these camps, who like do the research about what the topic means beforehand, it's something we're not entirely sure about. I'd say that from straw polls I've done with people teaching at camps across the country, we're like 62% sure that legal immigration doesn't include non-immigrant visas. A non-immigrant visa is a temporary visa like an H-1B, and we're also talking in the category of things like refugees, people who seek asylum, and you'll notice that I just discussed every aspect of this camp and said I'm 62% sure it's not topical. Being convinced that a term of art in the literature likely excludes something doesn't mean it's a non-starter. People read acts that are borderline not topical all the time and they win. So it's a debate. It just means you're going to debate a T violation, and you will have to defend that legal immigration includes non-immigrant visas. You'll have to defend that from the perspective of precision. Is this actually how the term of art means? Is it how it's defined in U.S. code? And you'll have to defend it in terms of what's a vision for what's good for debate. Is this a good topic if we don't talk about refugees and H-1Bs, which are the 2 biggest points of concern in contemporary immigration debates? Are we really having an immigration topic if we're not talking about those things? That's the kind of rhetoric you're going to hear from the AF when they read their Refugees Act. That it would be a crime against humanity to have an immigration topic and not talk about Syrian refugees. That's what you hear from the AF. From the NEG, you'll hear limits. And I don't mean to undersell the NEG. Limits are important, and immigration is a huge topic. So maybe we should just be talking about EB visas and a path to citizenship for the undocumented folks that are living in the United States. That's a big key debate. Okay, I do have a finite amount of time, and I want to talk about more things in the negative. I said one of the biggest objections to the topic is the politics dissent. There are lots of different types of politics dissents. There is the agenda politics dissent, which is often called political capital, which you might be familiar with. In my lecture notes, I took the time to strike that through because that dissent makes no sense. Because this current political administration does not spend political capital on agenda items consistently. Let me give you an example. On Tuesday, April 19th, Trump said to congressional Republicans, I back your compromise immigration bill 1,000%. On Thursday, April 21st, 2 days later, Trump said to House Republicans, you should not waste time on an immigration bill right now. Do something more productive. 2 days. It took 2 days for the administration to flip-flop on that position. A political capital DA says the plan trades off with a different political opportunity. The president is spending all of their political energy trying to get this thing done, and the plan takes away from that. That's not how it works these days. There are other politics dissents. I'm a fan of the base TA, which is in our camp starter set. The base TA says that the Trump administration spends all of its political energy catering to a narrow part of the Republican base that were the 2016 Trump voters. That Trump is concerned about one thing, making the people who voted for him happy, making the people that still support him keep supporting him. As an astute observer of politics who reads the news and follows what this administration does, that vibes true to me. It feels right. It feels like it's the truth, that the Trump administration caters to its base. It's not particularly surprising. You probably want to support the people who got you elected to the President of the United States when you're the President of the United States. So I think it has some truth to it. And it is also certainly true that increasing immigration would displease the Trump base. I don't know how carefully you follow the news, but that's a thing that's kind of true. You're welcome to argue with me on that or anything. Even when I say I think a position doesn't have any relationship to reality, like the terrorism DA or that they're taking our jobs DA, I'm just a person. And you can say I'm wrong. And you should do so with evidence and facts and reasoning, but you can certainly disagree with me. Because we're all just people, and we can be wrong sometimes, and you're at debate camp. I'm giving you my perspective, which is based in years of training in debate and political science and the academy, and that has some worth. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending your money to learn from me. But it doesn't mean I'll be right every time. So feel free to challenge me. But I feel confident saying the Trump administration caters to its base and that base is anti-immigrant. I see that reflected in policies like Trump decreasing the amount of refugees that enters the country, the travel ban. I see that reflected in changes to the H-1B visa that no longer allows the spouses of people on H-1B visas to work. And that's a significant change. If you come to this country on an H-1B visa, your spouse used to be allowed to work. It kind of is not great if your spouse can't work because it decreases the incentive to come to the United States. Remember, H-1B visa, best and brightest, the smartest people in the world. They have a choice about where they want to go. If you're a PhD in astrophysics from India and you're thinking, oh, do I want to go to Caltech and get this awesome job in the academy, or do I want to go to Oxford and get this other awesome job in the academy? And Caltech's like, well, your husband could not legally work in our country. If you come here, then you're like, Oxford it is. A flip side of that is spousal abuse. You are stuck to someone if you don't have an independent source of income. You don't have an escape route. And it makes it dangerous and impossible to leave abusive relationships when we restrict the ability of someone's spouse to work, which is another problem with current changes to H-1B visa. All this just sort of demonstrates the point, the moves that the administration makes, whether it's with regard to undocumented immigration like the family reunification policies, or what they say they actually care about, legal immigration, they're still screwing people over who are immigrants. And the base not only doesn't mind, but likes those policies. They hold very well among people who voted for Trump in 2016. So the DA that says the base likes Trump right now, uniqueness, the plan is pro-immigrant, which makes the base angry, link, and the base is important for some reason, or the base's support of the president is important for some reason, politics aside, impact. That to me seems like a very coherent DA that links to nearly every affirmative. Two other types of politics DAs. Midterm elections, plan changes the outcome of that in a way that makes the world worse. And horse trading, the wall DA. This is what I've seen pop up at a couple of camps. Horse trading is a political term of art that refers to you give me X, I'll give you Y. Let's make a deal. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And what this DA looks like is it says that in order for a liberal immigration policy to pass, like DACA, making DACA permanent and congressional instead of an XO that's being undermined by the president, the Republicans would demand funding for the wall in return. And building the wall is bad. DA. Uniqueness, no wall now. Link, the plan gets horse traded for the wall. Impact, the wall is bad. Francisco.
With fiat, why do we have to consider how the plan is passed?
Yeah, I agree. So I think that politics dissents are awesome. But I think that politics dissents should be about reactions to the plan and not the processes of the plan. That said, Do I think the wall DA will win deep elims at bid tournaments? No. Not unless somebody really messes up real good. Do I think the wall debate will get read 400 times every tournament that you're at? Yes. Will we talk about how to debate theory so you can beat the wall DA into the ground on both theory and substance? Yes. But yeah, this is the lower end of the politics DAs. The base DA is fire. If I'm being honest, I think the base DA is real good. I think it should be at practically every 1 and C that you have this year, that you have a flex or policy 1 and C. The midterms DA, I kind of think it's garbage. I could be wrong. There are people who vehemently disagree with me, smart people who lead labs across the country. I think the link doesn't make any sense. I don't have enough time to get into it right now, but we can definitely talk about it in lab. You can ask me questions in between lab later. The wall DA is like trash, like probably. It's like probably not very good. Those are sort of just my gut level opinions about those politics DAs. Will I coach my teams to occasionally read the wall DA because it's strategic, or midterms because the base DA doesn't have a particularly good link to the affirmative in rare instances? Sure. Sure. But I think Francisco's right. I think theory takes out the wall. But I wanted to give you a survey of the different politics sets that are available. Base DA is good, GMDI is trash, wall DA is trash, midterms DA is, we'll see. We'll see. The only other thing I have in the disads section of my internal notes is under the header racist things, and it says terrorism DA and overpopulation bad. So I won't really talk about those things, but those are things that might get debated. Critiques. I have carefully combed through all of the available online evidence from camps, and I have found 2 categories of critiques. 1, settler colonialism bad. Immigration reform makes the mistake of thinking we have the proper agency to decide who comes into this country when it is not our country. This land is stolen land. That's a fact. Settler colonialism critique says that thinking that you get to ask who should be here is settlerism 101. Because this, unless anyone in this room is native, is not your land. Many of us in this room are immigrants. Some of us, when we trace our ancestry back, are arrivants, people who are forced to come here. And a few of us might be native. Those of you who are native, no one else can say that this land wasn't stolen. So the settler colonialism critique says you don't have the right to say who should come here. Francisco.
Isn't that a bit unrealistic? Like, obviously it's horrible what happened to natives, but since it had, like, what real effect or impact would that be? Is my question.
Settler colonialism.
But like,
That you're participating in a settler economy of politics.
but wouldn't it be better to like really help other countries like come into our country than like? I mean, these are just possible debates for next year.
Yeah, this is a whole big debate. Do I think that settler colonialism
I do see that.
is a reason to turn away a Syrian refugee? No, I think that would probably be a co-option of smart indigenous discourses for evil conservative purposes. And I would say that there is definitely lots of truth value to the statement that we're sort of putting the cart before the horse when we think we get the right to decide who comes into this country. But at the same time, if we use settler colonialism, the settler colonialism critique as an excuse to turn away those in need, then we're kind of just being real jerks.
I mean, there's one more thing. Couldn't you do like a thing for the app to like consult natives about whatever plan it is or something like that? I don't even know what's on the app.
Well, the affirmative has to reduce restrictions on legal immigration. Your question is, can
the apps plan like add to consult indigenous people? Just to like get rid of that possibility.
Well, first, let me say it's complicated to consult indigenous people, because what does that mean? Who do you ask? The second thing is I'm not sure that it's topical. And the third thing is that you might find yourself having some weird debates if that's in your plan every time. And I'm not sure those would be debates that make it easier to win. But is that an idea? Sure. And it's interesting because it's sort of parallel. Well, yeah, it's a thought. Yeah. The second category of critiques that I've seen, which is like 17 different camp critiques, is what I'll call a mishmash palliative borders / neoliberalism critique. I understand that is a lot of words. Basically, every critique from every camp file I've looked at says that citizenship is bad as a concept, that when we say you are an American, the unspoken corollary to that statement is someone else is not and their life is not as valuable. When we give someone citizenship, which we've already had a fierce debate about whether or not that's what legal immigration is, we are saying you have rights that someone else doesn't. And the critique says, making the first statement, congratulations, you have the rights of an American, necessitates the second statement. And if you weren't an American, you don't have rights. We say due process belongs to American citizens, and then we detain indefinitely without a hearing people in Guantanamo and black sites that the CIA runs around the country. And saying you as a citizen have guaranteed due process means that anyone who's not, we can treat poorly. The critique says, and this is why I use the word palliative, which is basically means to make something slightly better. The critique says that when you allow more legal immigration, you are making it easier to paint a smiling face on an oppressive system. You are making the system of citizenship look good. Look at all these Syrian refugees we took in while we continue to bomb indiscriminately in Yemen and Libya and Afghanistan and Iraq. We can do all these things to those people because they're not citizens. We don't have to give them a trial before we murder them with bombs from the sky. And that's the palliative part is important. You make the system look a little better, which makes it easier to operate in a sort of more evil underside. Remind me your name?
Jake?
Jake?
Yes.
Okay.
What is that critique called?
So there are a lot of different camp critique files, and they have called it a lot of different things. The Michigan K-Lab called their critique something particularly bougie, like the speculative movement critique or something like that. Kyler called ours Spivak, I guess. Who wrote the K with Kyler? Was it Kyler? Oh, Nick and Kyler called our critique Spivak. And that makes sense. Each of these critiques like sort of does vary in important ways. They draw on different primary authors. But my diagnosis of nearly every camp critique file is that it's a band-aid / palliative link. You make the world look a little better, but it's really not. So you're just masking or hiding the real problem. Centered around either a critique of neoliberalism or borders. Usually centered around the idea that the invocation of citizenship is problematic. Jackson?
So I since basically what I've been doing debate for is I want to basically become a historian. I've learned about this. It's a bit more speculation on historian's part, so it may or may not have happened because it's so early in documentation that it's kind of foggy.
Sure.
So basically, when you know how we have in Europe, most of the early, a lot of our, if you look at Europe from the early parts, there is this a problem in Europe. There's a king. He did relatively well for a king of that time, and he got a good amount of extra land for his little kingdom. So, but and then when he died, then his son, he had one son, so then he did pretty well. So they added more land, and it seemed like everything was going to go fine. But then his son, he had three sons, and those three sons were all divided on who is going to get all of the kingdoms. So they split it up into threes. But the problem with that was they didn't exactly give, in this time, the kind of ideal of citizenship was not exactly a thing. you basically knew who was like the lord of this your little farm village more than like your king in a way. We always kind of portray it in movies and things like that, that every single citizen in every little rural village, farm, and a kingdom know who the king is, but not exactly. They wouldn't exactly answer to the king and things like that. It'd be more tied to whoever the subordinate of the king that was in that area. And because of that, they ended up basically splitting, and they didn't really move these borders that they created for this division of power very well. Basically, completely haphazard borders, not following any natural trails or anything like that. And because of it, each side, since these two other kings had conquered so much and taken all these other people into the kingdom, it was a kind of like a melting pot of different ethnicities, and well, basically regions. You had the Franks, which are basically the like Beta French. You had the Germanic people, which are German, but then in the middle, so basically it would be kind of like this. It was a picture, it was a YouTube video that I watched for this, and they had drawings for it, but I don't have them, so I'll just try to do it with my hands. Basically, you have one side, which is the Germanic, and then you have one side that's the French, but in the middle, it's a bit more of kind of like a line. And you see, already there's also a problem with that border because basically the country in the middle now has two people that. But the problem with that dispute, the biggest dispute for these three little provinces was the middle one said it was a mix of Germanic and French people, and the Franks. I mean, sorry, I said that wrong. But the problem with that is basically they each side wanted to bring back their lost people, but they couldn't exactly claim all of that area as their lost people. And because of that decision to split up a country into three parts, basically caused most of the wars in Europe for years. If you look back, this is a bit more of a theory, so it could be different, something else could have happened, but basically the theory is that because of this decision to split it up between people like that, it basically caused most of the wars in Europe for years and years, which also caused us to get involved in for America to technically even exist because Britain wouldn't have gone there if they really needed some spices.
Well, I appreciate the coffee break.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think borders are complicated, and immigration is complicated. Where these critiques are going to get complicated is in saying what we should do with those borders instead, and what we should do with that idea of citizenship. And it's in the alternative, and sort of figuring out how you, on the negative, read a leftist position while also saying immigration bad. That's complicated because the literature on citizenship bad is fine. There are very good critiques of the idea of citizenship, that it necessitates the exclusion and othering of everyone who doesn't fit into that. But to then say that that literature, that true statement, that good idea means that we should, for example, turn away Syrian refugees. Now suddenly we're in complicated waters and it looks like the AF's going to win, right? Because then they remembered they have an AF and that the structural violence faced by Syrian refugees who don't have a place to go is a really bad thing. And while it's true that citizenship is bad, hey, maybe why don't we also just take in these Syrian refugees? Figuring out a smart alternative, a smart way to fix those problems with borders. This time in America, not in Europe and the clashes between the Franks and the Germans. But figuring out how to craft that alternative will be the key to making those critiques work. I have two other sections I briefly want to talk about in my remaining time. The first is T, and we kind of already hashed out everything I wanted to say here, which is that there's going to be a debate about whether or not legal immigration means permanent immigration, whether or not it includes non-immigrant visas like H-1Bs. And that debate is going to create a cool double bind strategy for the negative, where the negative says either you linked to my T violation that says you have to be permanent, your visas have to be permanent, or I can read this counter plan to do temporary. I can read an H-1B counter plan to an EB-1F, where the only difference is whether or not you get to stay here for as long as you would like. I can read a TPS counter plan, temporary protected status, to an F that lets refugees in and say, no, we should just give them TPS, temporary protected status, instead. So there'll be a consistent strategy on the negative to counterplan and say, yes, immigration good, but permanent immigration bad. And the difference between the two strategies, or the net benefit, could be the politics dissent, or it could be LPR bad, legal permanent residence bad. And when we say legal immigration as a term of art requires a permanent visa, what we're talking about is LPR. LPR is like the first step on the path toward green card or nationalization. If you come into this country on an EB-1 visa, that means that you will have the option to apply for legal permanent residence, which means you can stay here as long as you like. If you have LPR, you are not a citizen. Just means you can like hang out with us and not leave. You don't have to leave. You can choose to apply for citizenship, meaning getting a green card, citizenship, getting nationalized as a U.S. citizen. That lets you vote. You're just, you're here, you're a citizen, you can vote, you can participate in American democracy. Some people choose to just get legal permanent residence, some people choose to pursue citizenship. Citizenship is sort of safer from the perspective of avoiding deportation. Jackie said, one of the things the initial travel ban did was not let in people who had LPR or green cards. And like, the left flipped out over the travel ban, right? The left was like, I cannot believe that you are refusing to allow people from Muslim countries to come to the United States. Now, why that was only the left, I'm not sure, because I thought we all agreed that discriminating based on religion was a bad thing, but apparently we don't all agree on that anymore with America. But even the centrists were like, whoa, you can't take away people's green cards. Those are citizens. Let them in. Don't be ridiculous. And the Trump administration is like, whoa, we pissed off the centrists. We have to revise the travel ban. We cannot take away citizenship from people. Now USCIS has formed, Jackie said USCIS basically runs immigration in the country. Less than 2 weeks ago, they formed a denationalization task force to try to take away people's green cards if they could find reasons, which is not great. But usually there's this idea that if you have LPR, if you have a green card, if you're a nationalized US citizen, that you, quote, came in the right way, that you did all the things that you should have to do for us to respect you as a human being and as an American, those people should be untouchable. So the F will say LPR is good. It is necessary to allow immigrants to have a sense of safety and security as permanent members of this country. And the counterplan will say LPR goes too far. We've maybe got some like econ dissent for why TPS is better than LPR, and that's debate. But it's a debate that will apply to nearly every affirmative, right? Because if the T violation is you have to offer permanent immigration status, and that means the neg always gets the counterplan to say, let's do a little bit less than that. Temporary visas. Okay, the very first thing I said, and I repeated it once, is that an immigration bad lecture is a silly lecture. I still tried to do the best I could for an hour, because you do need generic options, space DA. But the best negative strategies will be affirmative specific. H-1Bs, EB-1s, EB-5s, the travel ban, refugees, Syria, path to citizenship, open borders, DACA, trafficking, special immigrant visas for translators, informant visas, family reunification visas. Those are probably going to be the most popular affirmatives on this topic. And by the time the season starts, if you have a strategy against each one of those apps, that's not generic and applies to every app on the topic, then whatever your goal is in this room, whether it's winning the state tournament or winning the tournament of champions, you will be well on your path. If you don't have a dissent to every one of those things, don't worry, it's okay. There's open evidence projects and the base DA is still fine. Okay, what's next? 8 minutes. I can field 8 minutes worth of questions, or you can take an 8-minute long break. And the break will begin when people don't have questions anymore.
Besides the base DA, what do you think is the best like strategy on the thing?
Best generic strategy?
I guess so, yeah.
Because if you ask me what's the best strategy, I'll say to what app. And the answer is going to be different for
Let me
every.
go into the Visa base stats.
Like
If it's
EV5, I honestly think the China brain drain DA is really good. Way back on the old college topic, there was really good literature about this place called Skolkovo in Russia, where Russia was spending billions of dollars trying to build what they called the Silicon Valley of Russia. And so Russia was attracting all of these EV5 type investors. And there was really good literature at the time that if the US increased its EV5s, it would be a zero-sum direct trade-off with people who were investing in Skolkovo in Russia. I don't think that's as true anymore right now. That was years and years ago. And I think the China brain drain DA argument is pretty good. But I haven't thought about EV5s in quite some time, so there's maybe something better out there, but I definitely started thinking about brain drain if I was thinking about EV5 pieces. It's a lot of money, it's got to come from somewhere.
So what kind of alt would you use on like the settler colonialism critique?
People really like to read this Tut and Yang article that says decolonization is not a metaphor. We have to participate in a very real process of decolonizing. And in the context of immigration policy, maybe that just means we take our hands off the wheel and we say, we don't get to make this decision. It's just a politics of refusal to say this is not something, that we get to decide.
So then who would get to decide that?
Natives.
You know, all three?
Indigenous people. I don't think there's one set alt to settler colonialism that's the right answer to that question, though. That's not a bad answer, and it's certainly the popular answer.
Wait, so would it basically mean that like only natives would be going to the government, or like how would that like happen?
If I was a critique debater and this is a cross-ex, I would probably start by saying something like, you're asking the wrong types of questions.
Okay.
Can you explain the base DA again? I know it's like that the Trump, like Trump's base, like he does things just to make his like fans and supporters happy. But what does that lead to? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I didn't talk about impacts. So there's largely two impacts to the base DA. The first one is lash out. So there's this famous movie called Wag the Dog. Has anyone seen it? Anyone know what the phrase wag the dog means? So wag the dog is a term of art in American politics that refers to the idea that when your political support is collapsing, you will do dangerous things to get it back up. So there's this well-studied effect in politics called the rally around the flag effect that says that in times of national security crises, presidents get very popular. Bush was never more popular than the days, months, and even years following 9/11. National security crises make you trust your leader. Bush won the 2004 presidential election on the argument that you should ride the horse that got you there, that you shouldn't change commanders in the middle of a war. People didn't like what was happening in Iraq in 2004, but Bush convinced them that they shouldn't switch things up in the middle of a war. And then in 2008, we were like, whoa, he was wrong. That was a bad idea. But it is probably true that national security crises make you really popular. So facing declining popularity from the 38% of the country who is still supporting Trump might cause Trump to do something like start a trade war or lash out at North Korea as they violate promises they made in Singapore to denuclearize in an effort to build up popularity. And there's, academic studies that look at this question of how do presidents act when their popularity falls out from under them? Are they more likely to instigate international trade or military crises? And the base DA says, yes, they are. That facing declining political support, Trump might do something dangerous to get that support back. The second impact deals with impeachment. And it's a little bit more complicated, but the argument is that y'all are familiar with Mueller's investigation of the president, whether or not he colluded with Russia or obstructed the investigation into colluding with Russia. However, as much as it's a legal investigation, impeachment is a political question. Whether or not Trump colluded with Russia, and I'm the leftist person in this room, and I don't think there's any evidence of that, or obstructed the investigation, which he definitely did. The question of whether or not he was impeached has very little to do with that because it's a political question. The House brings articles of impeachment and then the Senate decides whether or not Trump gets impeached. And those are elected representatives doing things to try and stay in office and be popular. And it's going to be a party line vote unless there's overwhelming evidence that Trump did something wrong. The base DA says that Republicans will never vote to impeach Trump as long as he has the support of the base. Because if I'm a senator from a state that Trump won, and I vote for Trump to be impeached, then the Trump supporters in my state are going to vote me out of office and put someone more right-wing in. I will face a primary threat. Right? If I'm a senator, maybe I care about doing good for the country, or maybe I just want to become a lobbyist and make a lot of money in the future. But basically, whatever my motivation is, I have to be in office to do it. I have to stay in office. So the people who will vote on the president's impeachment are primarily motivated by their own electoral considerations. And Trump's support of the base, if you're in a very red state, determines whether or not you will get elected. Because if you take an anti-Trump position, Flake, Cardin, not Cardin, who am I thinking? McCain, Corker, thank you, that's right. Those people either just dropped out of running for Congress because they knew they couldn't win while taking anti-Trump positions and being Republican, or will probably get voted out of office.
Didn't Jeff Flake either, he's not running for another term?
Correct, yeah. Jeff Flake just gave up. Jeff Flake was like, we have to take a stand against Trump. I'm not running for Congress again. It's cowardly, but he's probably right that he couldn't win because his state is way too red. He will lose because the base will punish him for speaking out against Trump. But if Trump loses the base, then the base won't punish people who vote against Trump. So there's a potential impeachment impact to reach the base yet. Some of this stuff is pretty complicated. If you don't grasp it, that's what lab time's for. Ask follow-up questions to me, to your lab leaders. You don't have to get all of this in one day. This lecture's like the survey to being neg on the topic. That's like 50% of your debates for the next year. If you don't understand everything about being neg on the topic, I promise you that's okay. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to have an inkling now. You're supposed to have a vague idea. And then we'll take that vague idea and we'll shape it and mold it and hammer it into a bunch of negative wins for you over the course of the next 1 to 2 weeks. Okay. It is 2 o'clock. You should go to your respective labs. My lab will take 210. I want you to be in lab, water, bathroom, whatever you need to do. Varsity lab over there, 210.